Welcome into the Commanders Report. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys for joining me here on a Wednesday. We got some injury updates today on the Washington Commanders, and then also the team is meeting with Treylon Burks, the wide receiver, former first-round pick out of Arkansas, formerly with the Tennessee Titans today. Going to break down what all the latest injury updates and, of course, what this meeting with Treylon Burks means for the Washington Commanders. But before we dive in today, guys, make sure you click that subscribe button. Technically, it is my day off today. But with all the injury updates and all the stuff that came out, I wanted to get in front of a camera today and just talk some Commanders football with you guys. So if you appreciate the extensive coverage that we give to you guys every single day, even on my off day, where I'm at home or whatever, I always try to get a video out to you guys every single day on this channel. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button for the latest Commanders updates. All right, so let's start here with the injury updates. And the big one of the day is a bit concerning here. Noah Brown, who has missed the last 4 games with a groin injury, returned to practice last week even, is now being placed on IR with that groin injury. Head coach Dan Quinn said today that they tried practicing him last week. It just didn't respond in the way that they were hoping. And now apparently he's going to have to miss even more time. So this is going to mean at least 8 games missed this season for Noah Brown. With this groin injury, he's going to have to miss at least the next 4 weeks because he's being placed on IR. And, of course, this is extremely disappointing if you are a Washington Commanders fan because, they brought back Noah Brown in free agency this year. They believed in him, and, he got injured last year. He got injured in the preseason this year. And then he gets injured here during the season, and you just can't keep Noah Brown healthy. And this has been a big problem of his, even going back to Dallas and Houston. A big reason why it didn't work out in those 2 places and why, frankly, it isn't working out right now here at the Washington Commanders is that he just can't stay on the field. And, when he has been on the field, he's been a decent player. I thought in the games he played this year, he wasn't phenomenal. But last year, he certainly seemed to develop a good chemistry with Jaden Daniels, all that stuff. There's a reason why this team brought him back this year. But now you're going to be missing him for, at minimum, 8 games. And who knows, when this groin injury is going to clear up for him. So it's definitely disappointing. And that means you have one of your starting wide receivers out for the foreseeable future here for at least another month. And, it certainly begs the question, will the Washington Commanders maybe make a move at wide receiver? Is it possible they make a trade before the trade deadline this year? There's certainly quite a few receivers out there that could be dealt that teams are going to be shopping over the course of the next month before the trade deadline. For those of you that don't know, the trade deadline is on November 4th this year in the National Football League. So you got about a half of a month here to kind of make a decision in terms of what do we want this wide receiver room to look like. Because even if Noah Brown comes back from this injury, guys, and he's back in the starting lineup, all that different stuff, can you really trust him to stay in the lineup at this point? Can you trust him to stay upright and stay healthy? And I just don't think the answer to that question right now is a yes. Now, you could give some opportunities to other players. You could give more opportunities to Luke McCaffrey and Jalen Lane and maybe even Robbie Chosen or Tay Martin or Chris Moore. But I at this point, I can't say that I see it as an impossibility that this team makes a move at the wide receiver position, whether that's in free agency or whether that be via trade, because at this point, guys, I don't trust Noah Brown at all to stay healthy. So very disappointing news that Brown will be out for at least another month. But some good news on the injury front at the wide receiver position is that Terry McLaurin is back at practice this week. Head coach Dan Quinn said once again he likes the trajectory of Terry McLaurin's recovery here, and there is some hope that he's going to be able to play this weekend versus the Dallas Cowboys, and that would obviously be a big deal because this game, man, it really feels like a big one because this is kind of, the game that the Commanders feel like that they should and could be able to win. But then over the next month, you've got some really tough games coming up, after this Dallas Cowboys game. So if you lose this game and you go below 500 and then you get a slate of really difficult football games, many of them on the road, it's just going to feel like, this season could be lost before it can be found again. And maybe you're just scrapping to find a, wild card playoff spot at the end of the season in the NFC. But hopefully, Terry McLaurin can come back this week. It's definitely concerning to me, guys, and this was a concern of mine even going back to training camp that, because he's holding in, he's not practicing with Jaden Daniels and all these different things. You guys will remember, if you've been watching the channel, my biggest concern with Terry McLaurin holding in was that he wasn't practicing enough. And we've seen it over the last several years. We saw it with Brandon Ayuk last year. We saw it with CeeDee Lamb last year. All these wide receivers that hold in or hold out and they don't practice all training camp and then they come to last second agreements. They usually have slow starts because they haven't been practicing and they haven't developed that rhythm with their quarterback yet. And then, they're more susceptible to injury, it appears. Like it happened to Ayuk last year. It happened to CD last year. It's happening to McLaurin now this year. And now that he's had this injury, he's had even less time to practice and get into a rhythm with Jaden Daniels. So even if McLaurin is back for this Cowboys game, guys, I'm not sure if it's going to be like, the same number one alpha type of receiver from Terry McLaurin that we're used to seeing from him, and that's definitely concerning. But just getting him back out there he was a limited participant in practice today. But if you can just get him back out there and get him reps with Jaden Daniels and get him more time, the sooner we can jumpstart this process of getting him ramped up and get that connection between JD and Terry that was so good last year. Get that streamlined again, because I think we can all agree the main thing here that we want is that those two are firing on all cylinders by the time we get to playoff time. Now, obviously, the Commanders have to put themselves in a position to, punch themselves a ticket to the dance and, get into the playoffs and all those different things. And you got to build the foundation for that with wins early in the season as well. But I think everyone can agree, the most crucial time for Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin to be playing at their best and, at the height of their powers is in January, just like it was last year when this team kind of rode that connection on offense between Daniels and Terry all the way to the NFC Championship game, right? So, hopefully Terry's going to be able to get back and we can start streamlining that process of getting him and Jaden on the same page again this year. Some more good news is that it sounds like Sam Cosmi has been looking great in practice. A couple of weeks ago, they opened up his 21-day practice window, and he's been a full participant in practices ever since he's come back. And it seems like he's got a pretty decent chance to finally get a helmet and be active for the first time since the playoffs last year. Now, it's unclear whether or not he would get the start over Andrew Wiley at right guard, but after last week where the offensive line kind of underwhelmed, I would say, versus the Bears defensive front, I think that this team is itching to get Sam Cosmi back out there, who frankly probably outside of Laramie Tunsil is their best offensive lineman on this team. So to get him injected into this group would be a big deal this week. And then also they opened the 21-day practice window for cornerback Jonathan Jones, who's still working his way back from a hamstring injury. They put him on IR a while back. And, I'm not sure if he's going to play this week or not. We'll see. But what I'll say about Jonathan Jones is that Mike Sainristil better start playing better because, in the weeks to come, if Sainristil keeps, having lapses in coverage, if he keeps, missing tackles and being out of position as a run defender from the nickel position, like if those things continue and Mike Sainristil continues to be a liability on defense, they might be looking at Jonathan Jones as somebody that's a former starter in this league, former slot corner starter in this league, to potentially take on that role full time and to maybe, I hate to even suggest this, guys, but bench Mike Sainristil. At some point you're going to have to look for solutions. And if Mike Sainristil is not cutting it, at the end of the day, I don't care where you drafted him in the draft, man. If he's not cutting it and you think somebody else can potentially do a better job, you got to make a switch at some point. So I'm really rooting for Mike to turn his season around. But, it's been, we're multiple weeks into the season now, 6 weeks into the year with 6 games, and Mike Sainristil just doesn't look good, guys. So hopefully he can turn it around. But with Jonathan Jones coming back, I think we at least have to discuss that possibility as something that we could see happen for the Washington Commanders defense in the weeks to come if Mike Sainristil can't turn it around and, his season, gets to a point where he needs to be benched at some point. But then Drake Jackson, who was just recently signed by the Washington Commanders this week, this former second-round pick, kind of a little bit of a concerning soundbite here from head coach Dan Quinn. He said today that Drake Jackson is still working his way back from the injury that he suffered last year that ended his season. And it's like, well, if he's still working his way back and he's still injured, why did we sign him? And why did we sign him to the active roster? It was just kind of a weird soundbite. Now, I will say if you're signing a guy to your active roster, you're probably not too worried about it, but it was just a little bit concerning to me when I heard Dan Quinn say, "Oh yeah, Drake Jackson, the guy we just signed in free agency, that's coming off a season-ending injury. Yeah, he's not all the way back healthy yet, and he's still working his way back." And I was just taken aback a little bit by that. Hopefully, it's nothing serious, and hopefully, it doesn't rear its ugly head if he gets an opportunity to play in the weeks to come. Because frankly, Drake Jackson's the type of guy that this team could really use on defense, especially with the injuries to Dorrance Armstrong and the injury to Dietrich Wise. To get a guy like Drake Jackson, who's over 270 pounds, really strong. He's known as kind of a good run defending player that can set the edge in a 4-3 defense, just like the Commanders run. And if he gets injured, that's just going to be another injury to this defensive end group that really can't afford to take any more, in my opinion. So then to finish up today's show here, guys, we'll shift here to Treylon Burks, who's actually in Ashburn today to meet with Dan Quinn and Adam Peters and the Commanders for the possibility of potentially signing on to this football team. And Burks is somebody that's a former first-round pick. He was getting a lot of Deebo Samuel comps coming out, if you'll remember. He was drafted to be the replacement for A.J. Brown. You'll remember that the Tennessee Titans traded away A.J. Brown for a first-round pick, and with that first-round pick in that draft, they used that pick on Treylon Burks, and he's had a hard time staying healthy. He's shown some good moments with some nice hands and some good yards after the catch stuff, but it's just never really come all together, and frankly, he's had a hard time staying on the field. So Burks is somebody that has a comparable skill set to Deebo Samuel, and it wouldn't shock me at all if they add him to the practice squad. Like for the scenario, let's say that Deebo Samuel goes down with injury, and we've already seen Deebo deal with a heel injury. He's played through it over the last few weeks, but I think they've kind of come to grips with the idea that, hey, this is a possibility that Deebo Samuel could be hurt. Maybe we bring in a guy like Treylon Burks, who's a similar type of body type, similar type of skill set as a designated touch, kind of yak threat type of player. And if Deebo goes down, then Treylon Burks could theoretically fill his role in the offense in the interim, so that we don't have to completely change what we do offensively if Deebo Samuel goes down. I think that would be a good plan. Now, if their plan is to sign Treylon Burks, put him on the active roster, and have him be like a starting receiver for this team, that's something that I'm not too happy about, and that's not something I'm too excited about. I would rather them trade for somebody, maybe like a Dontavian Wicks, or maybe like a Christian Kirk, or a Jacoby Myers, or a Rashid Shaheed, or Chris Olave. I'd rather have them kind of go out and make a splash move like that, as opposed to bringing in a guy like Treylon Burks, who doesn't really run routes all that well. He's although he's made some nice catches, he has a little bit of a drop issue. He's had an issue staying healthy, which of course is an issue with Noah Brown and other players in this receiver room as well. And I don't think adding another guy with a similar skill set to Deebo Samuel is going to help this team out in terms of separating versus man coverage. Teams are playing a lot of man coverage versus the Washington Commanders offense right now because they don't fear any of the receiving options for the Commanders to beat them down the field. It's honestly why Cliff Kingsbury's actually been able to get away with some of these fake screens, double moves, stuff like that, is because there's no deep safety help against this Commanders team right now, especially down the sidelines. So I think to get teams kind of out of that aggressive mindset, you got to have somebody in this room that can separate versus man. And to this point, Luke McCaffrey hasn't done a good enough job of that. Chris Moore hasn't done a good enough job of that. Jalen Moore hasn't done a good enough job of that. And Deebo Samuel has never been a separator type. He's more of a gadget piece, kind of a manufactured touch guy, a run blocker. Deebo Samuel's an awesome player, but if you're asking him to separate versus man coverage and route somebody up consistently, it's just not going to happen. So the good news is there are some good route runners out there available via trade. And even though I know the Commanders don't have a ton of draft capital for the 2026 draft, I would implore Adam Peters and Dan Quinn to get creative in ways that maybe you don't trade all that much for a receiver, but maybe you could trade like a 5th round pick or something like that for Christian Kirk, or maybe you can get him for a 6th round pick, or there's receivers out there that could be got for a day 3 pick that I think would be worth adding to this football team. So I would implore Adam Peters and Dan Quinn to get aggressive a little bit here. Try and go get a receiver that can help you out, because even if Noah Brown comes back in 4 weeks, guys, I don't trust him to stay on the field. So hopefully we can get Terry McLaurin back this week. Hopefully he can stay healthy. that is a very important piece to the puzzle here if the Commanders are legitimately going to compete for a Super Bowl this year. And if you can add another route runner to this group, I think that would open a lot of things up underneath. I think that would get these teams out of playing as much man as they're playing versus the Washington Commanders offense right now. And I think that could be another piece to the puzzle that can get this team and this general vibe of the team on the right track moving forward. That's going to be it for me today, though, guys. But thank you guys so much for sticking with me here. Make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. We're going to have more coverage on the Washington Commanders coming up tomorrow, so make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Until next time, guys, hail to the Commanders.